be a waste not to honor that, don't you think?
So I want to start by asking, to my knowledge, this is your first time working together since the life and death of Peter Sellers 20 years ago. I love that film, and you have such a different dynamic in that movie compared to this one. What was it like to get to reunite after all this time and also play with quite a different relationship together? John, we can start with you.
Oh, well, it's exactly what you hope for in your acting career. First of all, to work again with people you had a great time with, but to do something completely different this time around. I had a small role in Peter Sellers, and Geoffrey had an enormous role. So I sort of dropped in and gave him moral support. I was the definition of a supporting player, but I watched him at work. I remember arriving in London and moving into the hotel, and Geoffrey was across the hall, and I bumped into him in the hall, and he immediately took me into his room and showed me about 45 minutes of extraordinary footage of Peter Sellers doing 100 different things. He was already deep in research. That was my first acquaintance with Geoffrey Rush. You remember that, Geoffrey? And I saw right away, wow, this is my kind of actor. So I was just thrilled when we ended up doing a real double act together on this one, and with horror intent rather than Peter Sellers.
Geoffrey, anything else to add?
Well, John and I had sort of we collided with each other in many diverse ways. You know, he presented me with an award on Broadway 15, 16 years ago. It was funny that morning because John was going on about something, and I think I wasn't used to being up that early because it was like a breakfast session. And he was going on, and I thought he was talking about Jane Fonda, who was in a play. And then I kept hearing the word king, and I was in this play called Exit the King, and I went, I think he's talking about me. And then he gave me this debut award or whatever. And then we met at the Emmys when he was Churchill and I was Einstein. We sort of went...
He just played King Lear. So.
Oh, that's right. Yeah. We realized we were quite old.
Well, I love hearing stories like that. It's really cool to hear that, you know, even though it's been 20 years since we've seen you on screen together, your paths still do cross, even in a professional setting too. I want to talk about your characters a little bit here. The director of this film, James Ashcroft, was saying that there's part of the reason for pushing this film, it obviously started as a short story, was he was so fascinated by this idea of taking something like bullying that you think is only exclusive to your childhood and then bringing it to a different stage of life. And I feel like that's, you know, when you take away the horror aspect, that is what this story is. It's a kind of a bullying tale. Is that something that kind of took you by surprise, Geoffrey, when you kind of take away the horror element of this film and look at it like that?
I asked him, John and I both individually had, independent Zoom interviews and chats with James when we read the script. But I said to him, why such dark material? And he explained that notion of, he has a very young family. And he said, bullying it permeates institutions, schools, life, relationships, and he's very intrigued by that and the genre heritage.
Yeah, and James is fascinated by the horror genre, but he makes his films with very, very serious and deeply felt intent. For one thing, James' wife runs a company which has 4 different senior care facility institutions, which were created by her parents. She's second generation working in this field. And he wanted to treat the subject of old age in a senior community very seriously, with great dignity, great feeling and compassion. And I think arguably, this is the best film ever made about that world. And it's played by all these absolutely beautiful actors, almost all of whom were over 80 years old, but all had 50-year-old careers in New Zealand theater. And they were so thrilled to be in this film. It's a terrifying and dark film, but we all were having a sort of giddy, gleeful time playing it.
Yeah, and I think based on what you just said there's a line that kind of corresponds to your framework of mindset in this film directly. Your character of Dave John, he says, we get old because we stop playing, but we also stop playing because we get old. And I feel like it almost, the way you guys are talking about this film, did it kind of like reinvigorate a sense of youth for you guys when playing these characters and playing with this story?
It's this century's Cocoon.
Yes, right. And look at me dancing and singing. I didn't know I was even capable of doing that anymore. Oh my God, I almost collapsed with fatigue shooting that particular scene. But it's reinvigorated me for sure. I just came back from New York where I did 5 performances dancing with the New York City Ballet. That doesn't bear explaining, but it's absolutely true.
I love hearing that. Geoffrey, to talk about your character a little bit here of Stefan, before he gets into the retirement home, he's categorized as someone who's quite arrogant. And obviously he has limitations now with where he is. He's partially paralyzed. Does he feel at all that what's happening to him at the hands of Dave is maybe like a karma or a punishment for how he behaved in his life before?
I don't know. The people have quoted that. I mean, that's copy. The notion of arrogance. I never thought of him as arrogant. I just thought he's absolutely entrenched in the world of legal procedure and ethical behavior. And he's a tough judge, you know. So they were the elements that I wanted to try and bring an authenticity to. But that really doesn't last for very long in the film because he suddenly finds himself in this institution. The challenge for me was, it was the restriction of being constantly in a wheelchair. But I had five sort of gears. There were 5 things with my good arm for speed. And I spent quite a lot of time getting skillful at that. And it gave me a shorthand with the director, James Ashcroft. Is this a level 1 scene or is this a French Connection number 5 where the wheelchair could get up to quite a pace?
You see this wonderful discovery of kindness in that character toward the end of the film. And after his long, terrible sojourn through the sort of psychological minefield that Dave Creeley has set for him, at the end, you see this beautiful compassion emerge. A lot of it has to do with our co-star, George Henry, who's this great Maori actor in New Zealand, who had a wonderful opportunity to sort of be introduced to a much, much wider audience. He gives a beautiful performance as Geoffrey's roommate.
Wow, that's very beautiful. Thank you for adding that. John, you got a lot of books back there. I'm trying to pick out if there's anything I recognize. I'm curious if you have any Harry Potters back there?
Not yet.
Well, I do got to ask the man himself. The word is Dumbledore is in your future. What can you tell me about that?
That's right. Well, it came as a total surprise to me. I just got the phone call up at the Sundance Film Festival for yet another film. And it was not an easy decision because it's going to define me for the last chapter of my life, I'm afraid. But I'm very excited. Some wonderful people are turning their attention back to Harry Potter.
No, I'm getting chills just hearing you say that because like you said, this is a role that for you is, I haven't seen you play a character like this ever. So is this something that you're prepared to do 7 seasons for?
Well, that's why it's been such a hard decision. I'll be about 87 years old at the wrap party. I don't know about this, but I've said yes.
Who rules? Jimmy Payne.
That's right.